Hi everyone, I'm Nirasha Deseram and you're watching International Trade Part 1. So under this lesson, the first area that we are going to look into is international trade theories. But before getting to the study of international trade theories, we need to know what international trade is and why do we engage in international trade? What are the benefits of international trade and the costs of engaging in international trade? Okay, so international trade, whenever we hear that word, we know what it is. Yes, that is, we exchange goods. We trade between countries. We trade goods and services across countries. Okay, so what is international trade? The trade between the territorial boundaries of countries. In other words, countries in the world exchanging goods and services with another country or with another group of countries. So it can be you're trading with one particular country or you are trading with a group of countries. And this is what we call international trade. So it can be import trade, okay, where we get goods from other countries, or it can be export trade where we send goods to other countries. Okay, now what we need to know is why do we engage in international trade? What are the reasons behind international trade? First one is inability of the countries to become self-sufficient. Self-sufficient era was there, but it is no more. People evolved, their needs expanded, that we studied, which means none of the countries can produce all what they want. There can be different reasons for that, but every country cannot produce everything that is needed for citizens. That is the reason behind international trade and technological advancements. We know every country is not advanced in technology, and every country doesn't have the same level of technology as well. But along with international advancement, this international trade evolves. The international trade at present is due to technological advancement. Okay, not only technological advancement, but technological advancement is a reason behind international trade. And then differences in resource ownership among countries. If every country had what every country has, if the resource endowment among countries were equal, I don't think there will be an international trade. Is based on specialization, based on product differentiations, they can have. But this different resource endowment or ownership among countries is the underlying cause behind international trade. Because what Sri Lanka has is not what India has. That means what Sri Lanka can produce is not what India can produce. Okay. Therefore, to get what India has, and for the Indian people to get what Sri Lanka has, we need international trade. And then developments in communication and transportation, obviously, because if there was no way to transport goods across countries, there won't be an international trade unless you go to that particular country and consume it then and there itself. Okay. Then gain specialization. That is, over the period of time when a country produces the same good, they become specialized in that production, and that is what you call specialization. And globalization, that is integration of the whole world into a one village, that is what you call globalization. That is, everyone and everything is connected, and that is a reason for international trade. Okay, so first we'll look at the benefits of international trade. First one, excess products can be sold at international markets. That means now the countries are going to specialize in production. Okay, now when you specialize in something, you know how to do that, and maybe you achieve economies of scale, your unit costs falls, your quality improves every day. You can produce extra units now, and to exchange that extra units of production, you need to have access to that international market where you can exchange your goods. Okay, then enable the consumption of goods which are not produced domestically. So whatever you consume, Whatever you have right now, just think, is everything being produced within the country? No, right? There are so many things that you consume that are being imported. There are so many things that you own that are being imported. Okay, so international trade enables you to consume what the country doesn't produce. Okay, then resources can be employed in productivity and efficiently. There is resources, you know what you have to produce and you are specialized in that. So the resource employment will be productive and efficient. Then high quality goods. That point, of course, I explained earlier as well, if you remember. Specialization. You specialize in the production, you know what are the bottlenecks. You know what can hinder the production. You know how to improve the quality of that product, which means you can consume a better quality product at a comparatively lower price because that country is specialized in that production. Okay, advanced technology can be obtained from foreign countries. This is another benefit of international trade. Maybe the country that you are living in, maybe Sri Lanka per se, we don't have that advanced technology. But as a result of we engaging in international trade, we have access to that technology. If we have the investment capacity, we can get access to that developed technology. Okay, then increasing the inflows of foreign investments, foreign aids, and foreign loans. So countries engage in international trade, their bonds strengthen, they have political relationships, they develop political relationships. It will inflow foreign investments, foreign aids, and foreign loans. Then increase of employment opportunities due to the progress of banking, insurance, and transportation resulted with the progress of international trade. So these employment opportunities can be domestically as well as internationally. Around the world, banking sector is evolving, insurance sector is evolving, transportation systems are being developed, which means employment opportunities are being created. Okay, that means employment opportunities are being created as a result of international trade. So we discussed few points, few benefits of international trade, and if any chance, if the question is asked, if you are supposed to explain it, yeah, you will have to give a brief explanation. Okay, these points are not that difficult to remember as well. So next we'll look at costs of international trade. Exploitation of weak countries by strong countries. That is a cost of international trade. Then adverse impacts of intense competition on infant domestic industries. There can be a domestic industry or a domestic firm, we'll say, who is trying to invest in a new technology, trying to introduce a new product, which is not being produced domestically. But there can be a country somewhere in the world who produces that product, who has specialized in that product and can export the product at a very lower price. So that is competition to that small industry which is going to start domestically. Then imported inflation. Imported inflation, the prices of imported goods increase. That is what you call imported inflation. Then social and cultural problems, which are obvious, and economic interdependence. You are not independent as an economy. Okay, you have to depend on other economies. You will have to depend on other countries for your survival. Okay. So now let's see the classification of trade theories. This classification is not very important. This is just to give you a small idea. So we have three types of trade theories: classical, mercantilism, and modern. Okay. So ignore mercantilism and modern trade theories. We are going to talk about classical trade theories. First one is absolute advantage. Second one is comparative advantage. Now, what is this absolute advantage? This was introduced by the economist Adam Smith, and he said if a particular country can produce a particular product at a lower production cost, at a lesser production cost than its trading partner, that country can have absolute advantage over that product. And if a country's production cost of a particular product is higher than its trading partner, that country has absolute disadvantage over that product. You will understand this better with the example. Just try to understand, okay? So this theory shows that when the countries engage in international trade, they will specialize in the product on which they have absolute advantage in, and they exchange the products. Okay, and this international trade, international trade gives mutual benefits for the countries which are engaging in international trade. Okay, so now we'll see what this theory says. So we have input approach and output approach both, and I'm going to explain you both. Input approach is the number of units required to produce a particular unit. Okay. Output approach shows the output of one resource unit. Using one resource unit, how many goods can be produced? Okay. So first we'll go through the input approach and then we'll come to the output approach. Okay. So see this example. So we have rice and tea, the number of labor units required for a unit of output. Rice, we need 3 labor units in Sri Lanka, and India 4 labor units. Tea, 6 labor units, and that is for Sri Lanka. Then India for tea, 1 labor unit. Okay. Now, absolute advantage is absolute. That is, whenever you look at the table, you can recognize what country has absolute advantage over which product. How you do this is, you go by the product. You go by the product and see if this is the input table. You go by the product and select the country which can produce a unit with lesser resources. Lesser resources. Okay. So in this case, Sri Lanka needs 3 labor units to produce 1 unit of rice, and India needs 4 labor units. So obviously 3 is less than 4, which means Sri Lanka has absolute advantage over rice. If we look at tea, Sri Lanka can produce 1 unit using 6 labor units. But India needs only 1 labor unit to produce 1 unit of tea, which means obviously 1 is less than 6. That means India has the absolute advantage over tea. Now we are going to assume that each country has 6 labor units and the resources that the country has are being employed equally among the industries. If you have 6 labor units, 3 in rice and 3 in tea. Now I have given you the output of the countries and the world without specialization, that is prior to specialization. That is, they are ignoring absolute advantage. You see, Sri Lanka can produce, to produce 1 unit of rice, Sri Lanka needs 3 labor units. Okay. Now you have 6, and for rice you can give 3 labor units. How many units of rice, how many kilograms of rice you can produce? Only 1. Tea, 0.5. So this numerator is the number of labor units available. And the denominator is the labor units required to produce a unit of output. Okay, that is how you get the production or the output of the country. Okay, so this is the production without specialization. India, you have 3 labor units, and to produce 1 unit, you need 4, which is 0.75. Again, you have 3 labor units, and labor units required to produce 1 unit is 1, which is 3. So as a whole, your production is both in India and Sri Lanka, both rice and tea production will be 5.25. But imagine now the countries are going to specialize in what they have absolute advantage in, and Sri Lanka is going to produce rice and India is going to produce tea. Okay, now Sri Lanka is going to produce rice. To produce 1 unit of rice, they need 3 labor units. 3 labor units. And Sri Lanka has 6 labor units. So 6 over 3 is 2. Sri Lanka can produce 2 units or 2 kilograms of rice. India also has 6 labor units, and to produce 1 kilogram of tea, India needs 1 unit of labor. So 6 over 1 is 1. Can you see that the total production of the world production increased from 5.25 to 8? This is what happens with specialization. You produce what you are good at. That increases the world production as well. Now we'll move to the output of fruits. Okay, so now this is the number of units that you can produce with 1 unit of resources. Okay, so in this case, you have to go by the product and select the country which can produce a higher number of units. Do you understand? You have to go by the product. Go by the product, and you have to identify which country can produce more number of units using 1 resource unit. Okay, so if we go through dal, Sri Lanka can produce 5 units, India can produce 6 units. So India has an absolute advantage. If we go through tea, Sri Lanka can produce 10 units, India can produce only 3 units, which means Sri Lanka has the absolute advantage in tea. Now again, if we assume that each country has 6 resource units and are employed equally, using 1 unit of resources, using 1 resource unit, Sri Lanka can produce 5 kilograms of dal. Then using 5 times 3. Okay, India 6 times 3. Okay, then when we move to tea, Sri Lanka can produce 10 units, 10 kilograms of tea using 1 resource unit. Okay, then using 3 units of resources, 3 resource units, 10 times 3, and India 3 times 3. This is prior to specialization, where the total production, the world production, we are assuming only Sri Lanka and India, they are in the world. Okay, so total production is 72. But if you specialize, if the countries specialize in what they have absolute advantage in, the total amount of resources what the country has, it doesn't have to split between 2 countries, 2 industries. No, they can engage it in the product. They can employ those resources in the product in which they have absolute advantage. So Sri Lanka can use all 6 units of resources to produce tea, which means 10 times 6, which is 60. And India can employ all the resources to produce dal, which is 6 times 6, 36. And now after specialization, this is production with specialization, total production increases to 96. Okay, so this is why countries have to countries have to identify absolute advantage and specialize on it, because it is beneficial. It is beneficial to the whole world. Okay. Now we are going to look at what are the sources of absolute advantage. Why this absolute advantage happens? Given that both the countries have the equal amount of resources, why can't they produce the same amount of goods? Okay, Now these are the reasons. Uniqueness of climate, ownership of resources, abundance of factors, goodwill, historical reasons of producing both goods. This ownership of resources means now here for the to simplify the things, I assumed that both the countries have 6 units of resources and are being employed equally and everything. But is it the same in the real world? No. What Sri Lanka has is not what India has and what not China has. Okay. So resource ownership differs. Climate change differences are there. Then the availability of factors, goodwill and historical reasons. When the absolute advantage is owned by one country or when absolute advantage is not owned by any country, their basis for beneficial trade would not occur. This is the main problem of the theory of absolute advantage. Now, what does this mean? This means, now if you do remember in the previous slide, in this slide, now one country has absolute advantage over something, no? You see, if you take the input table, Sri Lanka has absolute advantage over rice and India has absolute advantage over tea. But what would have happened that India also can produce tea, 1 unit of tea. To produce 1 unit of tea, if India required 4 units of labor. And to produce 1 unit of rice, India requires 1 unit of labor. That means this 4 and 1 changes the places, alters the places. What would have happened? Then both the countries, can they engage in national trade? No. Why? Because no one can specialize in producing tea. Do you understand? Okay. Or there can be situations that none of the countries has absolute advantage. None of the countries have absolute advantage either through input approach or output approach. Or both the countries have absolute advantage over the same product. In the example which I just told, both the countries will have absolute advantage over rice, but not tea. Then international trade cannot happen. And this is the shortcoming. This is the main problem with absolute advantage. And to overcome that only, the economist David Ricardo introduced comparative advantage theory. That means all the countries might not have absolute advantage, but they can have comparative advantage. What is this theory? This theory says that this theory is about opportunity cost. Earlier theory, that is absolute advantage, was about resource units, no? Cost of production. This is about opportunity cost. This says if a country can produce a good with a relatively lesser opportunity cost than its trading partner, then that country has comparative advantage over that good. And if any given country, if any given country's opportunity cost over a product is higher than its trading partner, that country has comparative disadvantage in producing that good. If you were clearly listening, it's the same definition, it's the same explanation. What changed was here it is less opportunity cost. Okay, but in the previous one, it was less cost of production. Okay. Therefore, when countries engage in international trade, they can export the good in which they have comparative advantage and import the good in which they have comparative disadvantage. It is the same as in absolute advantage, and they can gain mutual benefits. So now we are going to see what are the assumptions. Before looking into the calculations, we'll see what are the assumptions in comparative advantage theory. So comparative advantage assumes perfect factor mobility. If not employed in one industry, you can use all the resources in the other industry the same way. Then constant returns to scale, no increasing returns, no decreasing returns. Then Transportation cost is not considered. Then all the economies have full employment of resources, one-to-one exchange rate, free trade between countries, constant returns to scale, fixed stock of resources. Yes, I'm sorry, constant returns to scale, the same point has been repeated. Then perfectly competitive international commodity market. So now these are the assumptions in absolute comparative advantage theory, and they are not that difficult to understand. They are self-explanatory points. Okay. Now we'll see how the calculation goes in this. Input approach and output approach again we have. So now in this, first we same as the previous one, we'll look at the input approach first. So you are given the labor units for a unit of output. Rice unit in Sri Lanka you need 3, and in India you need 4 units. And for tea in Sri Lanka you need 6 units, and in India you need 2 units. Okay. Now this is how your teacher's guide recommends you to do the calculation. Your teacher's guide asks you to convert this input table to output table. Okay. To convert your input table to output table, and thereafter you can continue the same procedure which you have to follow if you are given the output table, because it's the output table at the end of the day. Okay. So we'll see how you convert this input table to output table. This is what your teacher's guide recommends. Okay. So assume each country has 6 units of labor and are employed equally among industries. That means 6 in rice and 6 in tea. You have 6 units of labor, and you can employ 3 units of labor in producing rice, and to produce 1 unit of rice you need 3 labor units, which means your output is just 1. Okay. Here also you have 3 units of labor, and to produce 1 unit of labor you need 6 units of labor, which means your output is 0.5. So numerator is the units of labor available, and denominator is the units of labor required to produce 1 unit, and that is how you get the output. Okay. So hereafter I will explain you the output approach. For using the output, how we are going to build up the opportunity cost table, then the production before specialization and production after specialization. It is the same thing that happens in this side as well with the input approach, because we converted the input table to output table. Okay. So now you have the output table here. Now you need to know opportunity cost. You have to calculate the opportunity cost. The equation to opportunity cost that was there in our first lesson, which we did. That was, yes, we discussed production possibilities curve. Okay, so in the production possibilities curve, I taught you that the equation to calculate opportunity cost is loss over the gain. Okay, so it is easy for you to understand how we are going to calculate this opportunity cost. Loss over the gain. Okay. If Sri Lanka chooses to produce dal, what is your opportunity cost? Loss is, if you are producing dal, you are losing 10 kilograms of tea. And 5 kilograms of dal is your gain. So loss over gain is 10 over 5, which is 2 units of tea. So the opportunity cost of producing 1 kilogram of dal is 2 kilograms of tea. Do you understand? So when you are given the output table, if you can't remember the input approach, output approach, what you have to remember is numerator. In your equation, your numerator is going to be the output of the other product, and the denominator is the output of the product in concern. Okay. So likewise, you can calculate the opportunity cost. Always opportunity cost is loss over gain, what you are losing and what you are gaining. Okay. Now you are again given that you have 6 units of labor and are employed equally among the industries. If you are not specializing, how will be your production? How will you calculate your production is the output times the units of labor available. Okay, so output is 2 units. Okay, now this calculation is wrong. Yes, this table is wrong, I'm sorry. So it will be 2 units. What have I taken? Oh, no. This is correct. Because this is the opportunity cost table. So you have to go with the output. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry for the confusion. This is the opportunity cost table. This is your output table. So you have to multiply your output with the available amount of resources, available units of resources. Okay, so Sri Lanka can produce 5 units of dal, 5 kilograms of dal using 1 unit of resource, 1 unit of labor, and you have 3 units of labor, that is 5 times 3. That is output into the number of labor units available. And before specialization, your world production is 72 units. The same thing that I have done in this side, I have calculated the opportunity cost. And in the other side, you will see the production before specialization and after specialization. Okay. So you have to calculate your production before specialization. And now production after specialization. Okay. So when you have calculated the opportunity cost table. So opportunity cost, lower the better. If you have low opportunity cost, that is good, no? So Sri Lanka can produce tea because the opportunity cost of producing 1 kilogram of tea is 0.5 kilograms of dal. In India, it is 2 kilograms of dal. So Sri Lanka is better. In India can produce tea, dal, because the opportunity cost of producing dal is only 0.5 units of tea. But in Sri Lanka, opportunity cost is 2 units of tea. Okay. So you have to select the opportunity cost, the lower opportunity cost. And that is what you get. And that is what the product in which you have to specialize in. Okay. You select the country with the lower opportunity cost. And you specialize in that, so that means you can employ all your resources on that production. Which means Sri Lanka will produce tea, India will produce dal, and the total production, the world production increases to 96. Before specialization, it was only 72, but now it is 96. Okay, so this is the comparative comparative advantage. Okay, I know it is this calculation, this opportunity cost table calculation might be a bit confusing at the very beginning, but the more the questions you practice, the more clear you will be. Okay. Now we have to look into mutually beneficial exchange rate. What is this? Mutually beneficial exchange rate is you are engaging in international trade, and now what is the exchange rate that is going to exist between the two countries who are engaging in international trade, and that is what you call mutually beneficial exchange rate. Okay, so under this mutually beneficial exchange rate, we are going to study internal exchange rate and external exchange rate both. Internal exchange rate is the exchange rate within the country. You see, you take Sri Lanka, you have 5 kilograms, either you can produce 5 kilograms of tea or 10 kilograms of, yes, Sri Lanka's production possibility is 5 kilograms of dal, yes, 10 kilograms of tea, no? Okay, so 5 kilograms to 10, which means to 1 kilogram of dal, you can have 3 kilograms of tea, and that is the exchange rate. So the other way around, if you want 1 kilogram of tea, that is 0.5 kilograms of dal. Okay, so that is your internal exchange rate. You make one side 1. You may, if you want 1 kilogram of dal, what is the cost of dal in terms of tea? Or if you want 1 kilogram of tea, what is the cost of tea in terms of dal? So it is very clearly given here. 5 kilograms of dal is to 10 kilograms of tea, then 1 kilogram of dal, 2 tea units. In India, dal is 6 and tea is 3. For 1 kilogram of dal, tea is 0.5. Then for 1 kilogram of tea, dal, 2 kilograms of dal. Okay, so this is how you calculate internal exchange rate. But what is important, but it is kind of complex to understand, is the external exchange rate. Now, external exchange rate is the exchange rate between the countries when they engage in international trade. Okay, so I have given you the opportunity cost table here. Using the opportunity cost only, we have to decide this mu external exchange rate. Now we'll see how we are going to do that. Now, 1 kilogram of dal. This is dal. To produce 1 kilogram of dal, India will have to sacrifice 0.5 units of tea. That is the lowest opportunity cost. And Sri Lanka, it will be 2 kilograms of tea. Okay. So the opportunity cost, this is based on the opportunity cost. So 1 kilogram of dal shall be greater than 0.5 units of tea and less than 2 units of tea. Because if it was greater than 5 units of tea, will Sri Lanka buy dal from India? No, because they can produce it in-house. Domestically, you can produce that. So Sri Lanka will not purchase dal from India. And is India willing to sell dal at a price which is less than 0.5 units of tea? No, because that is the cost of producing dal. Since that is the cost, it will be obviously greater than that. And Sri Lanka will not be willing to pay a price which is greater than 2 kilograms of tea, because that is the opportunity cost. Okay. And 1 kilogram of tea should be greater than 0.5 units of dal, but less than 2 units of dal. It's the same scenario for the other product. Okay. So if you go by the product, okay, the easy way to understand this is you go by the product and you have the opportunity costs. It should be greater than the lowest opportunity cost and less than the highest opportunity cost. Okay. Any exchange rate between the countries can exist based on these ranges. So based on these ranges, you can have any exchange rate. So it can be 1 kilogram of tea to 1 kilogram of dal, or 1.5 kilograms of tea to 1.5 kilogram, 1 kilogram of dal, or 0.75 kilograms of tea. So this is the range. Your exchange rate has to be within this range. Okay. Therefore, by exchanging goods under such rate brings advantages to both countries. So if India can sell dal to Sri Lanka at a price which is more than 0.5 units of tea, it is beneficial for India. Okay. And also if it is less than 2 kilograms of tea, it is beneficial for Sri Lanka as well, because it is very much less than your cost. Okay. So that is how you calculate this external exchange rate. Now we are going to discuss the consumption and international trade, how this consumption changes with international trade. Now we are supposed to assume that each country enters into trade under a 1-to-1 exchange rate, and Sri Lanka agrees to exchange, yes, 1/3 of its tea production with India. Therefore, trade will be, so Sri Lanka's tea production 1/3 means 20 kilograms, 1:1, that is 20 kilograms of tea to 20 kilograms of dal. Okay. So 1:1 is mutually beneficial, no? 1:1 is mutually beneficial. Okay. So now this is the production. This is the world production. Okay. This is the world production. And this is the production possibilities curves of Sri Lanka and India based on this output. Okay. That means Each country has 6 units of resources, and this is the outputs that they can produce, and what is the maximum amount of units that they can produce using the resources. Okay, this is a simple production possibilities curve which I have built. Now, if the countries do not engage in international trade, I'll explain using Sri Lanka. The consumption point will also be somewhere on this line, on this production possibilities curve or within this curve. Okay, but as a result of their country engaging in national trade, Sri Lanka is exporting 20 units of dal. Sri Lanka exports 20 units of tea. Sri Lanka produced tea 60 units. Okay, now this is your production point. This is what your production point is. Okay, look at the arrow, and this is what your production point is. Now, if there is no international trade, that will be your consumption as well, because that will be what you produce. But as a result of engaging international trade, now Sri Lanka consumes only 40 units of tea, but also consumes 20 units of dal. Okay, you can plot this, you can measure this, you can measure and plot this diagram, and you will obviously get a point. Outside this PPC, this is your consumption possibilities curve. Okay, so when you are engaging in international trade, your consumption will be higher than your production possibility. So if you move to, if you look at India, India can produce 36 units of dal or 18 units of tea. But India chooses to produce 36 units of dal because that is what it has comparative advantage over. And now it exports 20 units to Sri Lanka. Then it is left with only 16 units of dal. But at the same time, it can have 20 units of tea, which is way beyond the production possibility, which is 18. That means obviously Sri Lanka also can have a consumption which is above and greater than its production possibility. And this is why we tell that through engaging in international trade, countries can gain mutual benefits. Okay, both the countries are gaining. Okay. Now we are going to look into sources of comparative advantage. So we are going to discuss 9 sources. First one is differences in resource endowment among countries, which I have explained to you like twice so far. So differences in resource endowment among countries. I told you what Sri Lanka has is not what India has, and what not, it's not what China has. Okay, so based on the available resources, based on the resource endowment among countries, their production possibilities change. Okay, so what they specialize in will change. So differences in ownership of resources, then quality. A country might have a unlimited amount of labor supply. A country will have a very high amount of labor supply, yet that labor is not trained, labor is not qualified. But there can be another country where there is only a very limited, very few amount of labor available in the market at present, but they are very qualified and they are very much trained. That means in that particular country, probably the quality of the production will be higher than in that other country where there was so much of labor available, but they're not trained or qualified. Okay, so that is what you call quality. Then differences in taste. Just as taste differs from one person to another. So just in that way, taste differs from a country to country. So this taste decides what the country can produce. And then economies of scale. That is when a country engages in the production of the same good over a long period of time, they achieve economies of scale. Their cost of production falls. They can produce, they can supply that good to other countries, they can export that good to other countries at a very lesser cost, probably at a cost which is at a very lesser price, probably which is even less than the cost of producing that good domestically. Okay, so that is economies of scale. Then product differentiation. can be the same product, but product differentiations are there. Then technological differences, government policies, it may support the production of that good, inflation, and location. Location in, of course, the country can be situated in a place which is very much easy to get raw materials, very much close to other countries. Okay, so that is what you call. So those are the sources of comparative advantage. Okay, and now we have two types of comparative advantage, which are, first one is static comparative advantage. Static comparative advantage, these are the comparative advantages which do not change with time, and they are being created mainly by the natural resources owned by the country. Static comparative advantages, they do not change with the time and are created using the natural resources of the country. So the static comparative advantage depends on three factors: resource endowment, differences in taste, and economies of scale. What you need to know is these three factors and static comparative advantage do not change over time and created by the natural resources. Dynamic comparative advantage, they also do not change with the time, but they are not created by natural resources. The sources, the reasons for dynamic comparative advantage are technological improvements, product differentiation, government policies, and trade agreements. Okay, there's nothing much that you have to know, just the two names and what are the factors that affect those. Okay, so then that is it for trade theories. Okay, so then we are going to look into trade protectionism. Trade protectionism. What is trade protectionism is the first point that we have to know. Trade protectionism means now we are engaging in national trade. When the countries engage in national trade, as we discussed earlier also, it can pose threats to the infant domestic industries. Okay, so protecting those infant industries from this international competition is what you call trade protectionism. Implementation of policies and strategies to protect domestic industries from the threats and adverse effects of import competition in national trade. And that is what you call trade protectionism. Okay. Now, why you need trade protectionism? Obviously, to protect the local producers. Infant industry argument. What is this infant industry argument? That means, see, it's here. Okay, the infant industry argument is explained here. This is an economic rationale for trade protectionism. The infant industry argument states that developing countries are justified to put tariffs on imports if they are seeking to develop new industries and diversify their economy. That is, they can import tariffs to protect their new industries. That is infant industry argument. Then obviously this will raise a revenue to the government. You will understand that. Then to manage the balance of payment, obviously, then you can limit the imports, you can promote exports. Then to prevent trade dumping and to manage exchange rate. So this is why we need trade protectionism. And you have arguments for, which means the benefits of trade protectionism, and arguments against, which talks about the costs of trade protectionism. Arguments for trade protectionism: protection of local infant industries and producers. That is the main objective. And it will raise the revenue to increase government revenue, positive impact on balance of payment and exchange rate, control price fluctuations, and economic independence and self-sufficiency. You will not be that much depending on the other countries. Okay. Then arguments against: contraction of trade. It is a barrier for international trade, right? Then inefficiency in resource allocation. Maybe that small infant industry is not even going to succeed in that. Yet you have to give the protection because you have hope. Okay. Then reduction in quality of the products, barriers against diffusion of technology, less choice to consumers, and lack of innovations. So these are the arguments against. Lack of innovation means if there is international competition, countries, but the firms or the industries will come up with new things, no? Because they want to fight that competition. But if they are being protected, no matter what they give to the market, maybe No matter what they give to the market, there is nothing competing against them. So the consumers have to get that. So that is what you call lack of innovation. Okay. So now we will see the instruments for trade protectionism. Instruments, you can categorize them into two. We have tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers. Non-tariff barriers, you do not need to know in detail, just the names. You can use quotas, producer subsidies, incentives, dumping, then limiting the exports voluntarily, controlling foreign exchange, and then limitations, rationing for exports and imports, trade embargoes, and you can enter into trade agreements. Those are non-tariff barriers. You have tariff barriers. Tariff barriers is a tariff, that is a fee that you impose on imports or exports. Impose on imports and exports. Tariffs on imports imposed with the objective of protecting domestic industries. Discourage imports as it increases the price of imports and attracts consumers for domestic products. You will see in a while how the tariff increases the price of the imports. So this is the objective of imposing tariff barriers, even non-tariff barriers. This tariff is a fee, it's like a tax. You impose it on imports, that the price of imports will go up, and it provides protection to the domestic producers as well. This creates an opportunity to increase price of domestic products. This creates an opportunity to increase the price of domestic products. You will see that as well when we are doing a calculation. So before doing the calculation, there are two terms which you need to know. First one is nominal rate of protectionism and the effective rate of protectionism. Nominal rate of protectionism, nominal rate of protection is the actual percentage of tariff imposed. We'll read out. Import tariffs increase the price of imports, allowing the domestic producers to increase the price of the domestic products. Nominal rate of protectionism refers to the percentage of tariff imposed when a good enters the country. But this doesn't depict the actual amount of protection received by the domestic product. Since domestic producers use imported inputs and intermediate goods for their production process. Therefore, to measure the actual amount of protection received by the domestic producers by the imposition of a tariff, an effective rate of protection is used. So if the tariff is 20%, nominal rate of protection is 20%. But the effective rate of protection differs. And this is how you calculate the effective rate of protection. So effective rate of protection measures the total effect of the entire tariff structure on the value added per unit of output in each industry when inputs, intermediate goods, and final goods are imported. Therefore, effective rate of protectionism is used to measure the real amount of protection afforded to the particular industry by import duties, tariffs, and other trade restrictions. So there's nothing much to explain. That's why I'm just reading through. The effective rate of protection measures the percentage effect of the entire tariff structure. So this is what you need to know. Nominal rate of protection is the rate of tariff. That is the actual rate of tariff. But effective rate of protection is the effect of the entire tariff structure on the value added per unit of output in each industry. So how you calculate effective rate of protection is V1 is value addition after tariff. V0 is value addition before tariff. You divide that by the value addition before tariff and you multiply it by 100. What is value addition? Value addition is the output value minus input value. Okay. That equation, of course, you will have to remember by any chance if you get a question. So we are going to discuss two examples which will give you a very much clear understanding how we are going to do this. Example 1. Suppose that a country produces shoes where the inputs are imported from another country for $200 and are being sold for $600. Assuming that a 10% tariff is imposed on imported shoes and not on imported inputs. Calculate the effective rate of protection. So what is the value added before tariff? Inputs are 200 and sold for 600. So we know what is value addition. Output value minus input value. Output value 600, input value 200. Value addition is 400. But now there is a 10% tariff on the imported shoe. Then what is the value addition after tariff? That is price of the shoe after tariff, which is 600 times 110%. This is 10%. So either you can do 600 times 10%, you get 60, you add it to 600. Or the easier way to do 600 times 110%. 660 you can get in one row. Okay. So that is the price of the shoe after the tariff. Now what is your value addition after tariff? Value addition after tariff is price of the shoe after tariff minus the value of imports. So 660 minus 200, which is 460. Now you have the values to calculate effective rate of protection. Is a value addition after tariff 460 minus value addition before tariff 400, divide by 400 times 100, it gives you 15%. See, 460 minus 400, which is 60. 60 divided by 400 times 100 is 15%. Okay. Now in this case, remember, you have 200 imports. $200 is your imported inputs, but there is no tariff charged on that. Now, what if there is a tariff on imported inputs as well? That is what we are going to see in this second example. Calculate the effective rate of protection assuming that a 10% tariff on imported inputs and a 20% tariff on imported finished goods are imposed. So value addition before tariff is the same. Now you have to calculate the cost of inputs after tariff as well as the price of the shoe after tariff. How you get the cost of inputs? The same way. What is the value of imports? Cost of imports before tariff was 200 and the tax tariff is 10%. So 200 times 210%, which is 220. And price of the shoe is 600 times 120%, which is 720. So value addition after tariff is 720 minus 220, which is 500. So you apply the same equation, 500 minus 400, divide by 400 times 100. It gives a 25% protection. Okay. So this is the rate of protection given by the whole tariff structure. Okay. So that is it for this video. So we discussed the theories, absolute advantage, comparative advantage, how the consumption increases, how the consumption is greater than the production. Then we discussed terms of trade. Yes, then exchange rates. Sorry, we didn't discuss terms of trade, but we discussed exchange rates, internal exchange rate as well as external rate of exchange. Then we came to protection, trade protectionism. Why this protectionism is important. Yes, you might get a question from these calculations of effective rate of protectionism or to differentiate between nominal rate of protection, effective rate of protection. So be thorough with these areas. So yes, in the next video, we'll be discussing the rest of this lesson. So thank you.